Evelyn Harper stood before her bedroom mirror on that cold February morning, her hands trembling as she fastened the pearl necklace her grandmother had given her on her wedding day. 7 years ago, those same pearls had rested against her skin as she walked down the aisle toward Christopher Brennan. The man who had promised her forever, now, at 34 years old and 8 months pregnant with their first child, she was preparing to face him in a Manhattan courthouse to end that forever. Good start. I need to continue building the story, establishing Evelyn's character, her background, and the circumstances that led to this moment. I should avoid using the excluded punctuation marks and keep the narrative flowing naturally in third person. The apartment in Upper East Side Manhattan felt emptier than usual that morning. Evelyn had once loved this place, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The modern kitchen where she and Christopher had cooked breakfast together on lazy Sunday mornings. The library filled with books they had collected from their travels around the world. Now, every corner held a memory that cut like broken glass. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. Her daughter. The ultrasound had revealed it 3 months ago. And Evelyn had cried tears of joy mixed with sorrow, knowing her child would be born into a broken home. She had dreamed of a different beginning for her baby, a home filled with love and laughter, not lawyers and courtroom battles. Evelyn had met Christopher Brennan. 7 years earlier at a charity gala she had organized for the Children's Hospital Foundation. She had been 27, building her event planning business from the ground up, working 18-hour days to make a name for herself in the competitive New York market. Christopher had been 31, already a billionaire from his revolutionary tech company, Brennan Innovations, which had transformed cloud computing security systems. He had approached her during the silent auction, commenting on how flawlessly the event was running. His dark brown eyes had sparkled with genuine admiration. His smile had been warm, not the practiced smile of the wealthy elite she usually encountered. They had talked for hours that night, long after the other guests had left, sitting on the steps of the museum venue, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Christopher had grown up in Boston, the son of a construction worker and a school teacher. He had earned his success through scholarships, late nights coding in college dorm rooms, and an unwavering belief in his vision. Evelyn had grown up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. They had both understood hunger, not the kind that money could fix, but the hunger for something more, for a life that mattered. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of romance that still made Evelyn's heart ache when she remembered it. Christopher had pursued her with the same intensity he brought to his business ventures. He sent her flowers every Monday with handwritten notes. He showed up at her office with coffee and pastries when she was working late. He took her on surprise weekend trips to Vermont, where they hiked through autumn forests and made love in cozy bed and breakfasts. 6 months after they met, he proposed to her on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise, with a custom-designed ring featuring a single perfect diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires that matched her eyes. They were married in a beautiful ceremony in the Hamptons, surrounded by 300 guests, but Evelyn had only seen Christopher that day, standing at the altar with tears streaming down his face as she walked toward him. The first 5 years of their marriage had been blissful. Christopher had been supportive of her business, often introducing her to potential clients and investors. Her company, Harper Events, had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 15 employees, handling some of the most prestigious events in New York City. They had traveled to Paris, Tokyo, Rome, and Rio de Janeiro. They had bought this apartment and spent months decorating it together, arguing playfully over paint colors and furniture placement. But then, things had started to change. Christopher's company had taken on a major expansion project, bringing in outside investors and new executives. One of those executives was Diana Rothwell, a brilliant businesswoman from Silicon Valley with an MBA from Stanford and a track record of turning struggling tech companies into billion-dollar enterprises. Christopher had been impressed by her credentials and had made her his business partner, giving her a significant stake in Brennan Innovations. Diana was beautiful in that cold, calculated way that made Evelyn uncomfortable. She had platinum blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, gray eyes that seemed to see through people, and a wardrobe of designer suits that cost more than most people's cars. From their first meeting, Evelyn had sensed something predatory about Diana, a hunger that went beyond business success. Her instincts had been correct. 6 months ago, Evelyn had discovered the affair in the most cliché way possible. When Christopher's phone had buzzed with a late-night text message while he was in the shower. The message from Diana had been explicit, referencing their afternoon meeting at the Plaza Hotel and how she could not wait to see him again. Evelyn had confronted Christopher that night, 8 weeks pregnant with the baby they had tried for years to conceive. She had expected him to deny it, to fight for their marriage, to show some remorse. Instead, he had been cold and distant. He told her that Diana understood the pressures of his world in ways Evelyn never could. He said their marriage had become stale, that Evelyn was too focused on her business and not enough on him. He said he wanted a divorce. The words had shattered her. Evelyn had never imagined that Christopher, the man who had once written her poetry and slow danced with her in their kitchen at midnight, could be capable of such cruelty. She had moved into the guest bedroom that night, and they had lived in the same apartment like hostile strangers ever since. Christopher's lawyers had been ruthless. They claimed Evelyn was mentally unstable due to pregnancy hormones. They suggested she was not fit to care for a newborn. They demanded full custody of their daughter once she was born, offering Evelyn limited visitation rights. They wanted to keep the apartment, most of their assets, and even tried to undervalue her business to minimize what she would receive in the settlement. Evelyn had hired the best divorce attorney she could afford, Patricia Morgan, a fierce woman in her 50s who had a reputation for defending women against powerful men. Patricia had warned her that the hearing today would be brutal, that Christopher's team would try to paint her as an unfit mother, that they would use every trick in their legal playbook. But Evelyn was determined to fight. She had built her life from nothing before, and she would do it again. She would not let Christopher or his lawyers take her daughter from her. She would not let them destroy her reputation or her business. She would walk into that courthouse with her head held high, even though every step felt like walking through fire. As she finished getting dressed in a navy maternity dress and low heels, Evelyn felt a dull ache in her lower back. She had been having these aches for the past week, and her obstetrician, Dr. Rachel Foster, had told her they were normal Braxton Hicks contractions. Practice contractions that prepared the body for labor. Dr. Foster had also told her to avoid stress and stay off her feet as much as possible, because there is a risk of early labor. But Evelyn could not miss this hearing. Too much was at stake. She took a deep breath, grabbed her briefcase with all her documents, and called for a car. The courthouse was in Lower Manhattan, a 40-minute drive through morning traffic. She had time to compose herself, to prepare for the battle ahead. As the car navigated through the crowded streets of New York City, Evelyn watched the familiar landmarks pass by. She thought about all the dreams she had once had, the future she had imagined with Christopher, the family they were supposed to build together. None of it had turned out the way she planned. But she still had her daughter, the tiny life growing inside her, and that gave her strength. The car pulled up to the courthouse steps at exactly 9 o'clock. Evelyn paid the driver and stepped out onto the sidewalk, feeling the cold February wind against her face. The building loomed before her, all stone and glass, and the weight of countless lives changed within its walls. She could see Patricia Morgan waiting at the entrance, her red hair bright against her black suit. Evelyn started climbing the steps, one hand on the railing, the other on her belly. The ache in her back had intensified, spreading around to her abdomen in a tight band of pressure. She paused halfway up, breathing through the discomfort. It passed after a moment, and she continued climbing. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. She did not know that the next few hours would bring revelations that would challenge everything she believed about her marriage, about Christopher, and about the woman who had destroyed their happiness. She did not know that before the day was over, she would give birth to her daughter under circumstances that would make headlines across the country. All she knew was that she had to keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward whatever future awaited her on the other side of those courthouse doors. The courtroom was packed when Evelyn entered, her attorney Patricia Morgan at her side. The room smelled of old wood polish and tension. Evelyn spotted Christopher immediately, sitting at the defendant's table with his 3 lawyers, all in matching dark suits. Next to him, sat Diana Rothwell, her presence like a slap in the face. Diana wore a cream-colored dress and a smug smile, her hand resting possessively on the table near Christopher's arm. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest as she took her seat. The ache in her back had become more pronounced, waves of pressure that came and went with increasing frequency. She shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position, but her body seemed determined to make this day even more difficult. Judge Harold Brennan, no relation to Christopher, despite the shared surname, entered the courtroom at 9:30. He was a stern-looking man in his 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that had seen countless families torn apart in this very room. Everyone stood as he took his seat at the bench, and Evelyn felt a sharp tightening across her abdomen that made her gasp softly. Patricia glanced at her with concern, but Evelyn shook her head, signaling she was fine. Christopher's lead attorney, Robert Hutchinson, a man known for his aggressive tactics and impressive win record, stood to present their case. He painted a picture of Evelyn as an unstable woman consumed by jealousy and revenge. He claimed she had threatened Christopher, had destroyed property in fits of rage, and had become so obsessed with his alleged affair that she had neglected her own health and the health of their unborn child. Each word felt like a knife. Evelyn wanted to stand up and scream that it was all lies, that she had been the faithful one, the one betrayed and humiliated. But Patricia had warned her to stay calm, to let the evidence speak for itself. The pain in her back was spreading now, wrapping around her sides in regular intervals. She checked her watch discreetly and realized the contractions were coming every 10 minutes. This could not be happening. Not here, not now. Hutchinson continued his presentation, showing emails that supposedly proved Evelyn's mental instability. She recognized some of them, angry messages she had sent to Christopher in the early days after discovering the affair, but others she had never seen before. Messages that seemed overly dramatic, threatening, completely unlike anything she would write. Patricia made notes furiously, clearly planning to challenge their authenticity, when it was Patricia's turn to present. She stood with the confidence of someone who held winning cards. She began by questioning the validity of the emails, pointing out inconsistencies in metadata and formatting. Then she dropped her first bombshell, producing phone records that showed Christopher and Diana had been in contact, far more frequently than Christopher had admitted, including dozens of calls and texts during times. When he claimed to be working late at the office, Christopher's face paled slightly, but he maintained his composure. Diana, however, shifted in her seat, her confident smile faltering for just a moment. Patricia continued, presenting statements from Evelyn's employees, friends, and even some of Christopher's own business associates who testified to her character, her work ethic, and her excitement about becoming a mother. She showed medical records from Dr. Foster confirming that Evelyn had attended every prenatal appointment, had followed all medical advice, and had shown no signs of mental instability. The pain was becoming unbearable. Evelyn gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles turning white. The contractions were now 7 minutes apart, then 5. She knew she should say something, should tell Patricia, but she could not leave. Not when the truth was finally coming out. Then Patricia presented her final piece of evidence, and the courtroom erupted. She had hired a forensic computer expert who had traced the suspicious emails back to their source. They had not come from Evelyn's computer at all. They had been sent from an IP address registered to Diana Rothwell's apartment in Tribeca. Diana had forged the emails. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Hutchinson demanded a recess to consult with his client. Judge Brennan looked furious at the deception taking place in his courtroom, and Christopher turned to look at Diana with an expression of utter betrayal and dawning horror. That was when Evelyn felt it. The unmistakable sensation of her water breaking. Warm liquid soaked through her dress and onto the chair. She tried to stand, tried to call out, but a contraction hit her with such force that she doubled over, crying out in pain. The courtroom descended into chaos. Patricia immediately called for an ambulance. The bailiff rushed to Evelyn's side. Judge Brennan ordered everyone to clear space, and Christopher, ignoring Diana's attempts to grab his arm, pushed past his lawyers and ran to Evelyn. He knelt beside her chair, his face stricken with fear and something else. something that looked like the man she had married 7 years ago. He took her hand, and she was too overwhelmed by pain to pull away. "I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, I am so sorry." About everything. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him it was too late for apologies. But another contraction tore through her, stealing her breath and her words. The ambulance arrived within minutes, paramedics rushing in with a stretcher and equipment. They assessed her quickly and determined that the baby was coming fast, too fast to wait, as they loaded her onto the stretcher. Christopher climbed into the ambulance without asking permission. One of the paramedics started to object, but Evelyn, in a moment of weakness, or perhaps clarity, nodded her consent. Diana stood on the courthouse steps, watching them drive away, her perfect facade finally cracking to reveal the rage beneath. At Lenox Hill Hospital, Evelyn was rushed to the maternity ward. The doctors confirmed what she already knew. Her daughter was coming, and there was no time for an epidural. No time for anything but the raw, primal act of bringing life into the world. Christopher stayed by her side. And despite everything, despite all the pain he had caused, Evelyn found herself grateful not to be alone. The labor lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of agony and tears and moments where Evelyn thought she could not go on. Christopher held her hand through all of it, whispering encouragement, apologizing over and over between contractions. And in those hours, something shifted between them. "Diana lied to me," Christopher said during a brief respite between contractions. His voice was thick with emotion. "She showed me fake text messages from your phone, messages to some man I had never heard of. She said you were having an affair, that you were only staying with me for my money. She manipulated everything, Evelyn. She wanted to take over the company, and she needed me isolated from everyone who actually cared about me. I was such a fool." Evelyn looked at him through tears of pain and exhaustion. "You chose to believe her over me." "I know," he said, his own tears falling now. "I know, and I will never forgive myself for that. I let my insecurity and ego blind me. When the business started struggling, when the pressure mounted, I felt like I was failing. Diana made me feel powerful again, made me feel like I was still the man who built an empire from nothing. But it was all manipulation. She was stealing company secrets, preparing to launch a competitor using my own technology. The affair, everything. It was just to distract me while she destroyed me." Another contraction hit, and Evelyn screamed. The nurses told her it was time to push. Christopher moved to her side, supporting her shoulders. And together they brought Sophia Rose into the world at 3:27 in the afternoon. When the doctor placed the tiny, crying baby on Evelyn's chest, everything else faded away. The pain, the betrayal, the courtroom drama. All that existed was this perfect little person. With Christopher's dark hair and Evelyn's blue eyes, their daughter, their miracle. Christopher looked at Sophia with wonder and heartbreak. And Evelyn saw on his face the man she had fallen in love with so many years ago. But she also saw the man who had shattered her trust, who had abandoned her when she needed him most. Could those two versions of him ever be reconciled? Could she ever trust him again? She did not have answers. Not yet. All she knew was that their daughter deserved better than parents at war with each other. Whatever happened next, they would have to find a way forward. For Sophia's sake, if not for their own. The first weeks after Sophia's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the overwhelming love that only a new mother can understand. Evelyn had moved into a recovery suite at the hospital for 3 days before being discharged, and Christopher had barely left their side. He slept in an uncomfortable chair, learned to change diapers with fumbling hands, and stared at his daughter with an expression of awe that never quite faded. Diana Rothwell was arrested 2 days after Sophia's birth. Patricia Morgan had worked with the district attorney's office and the FBI to build a case against her for corporate espionage, fraud, and forgery. The investigation revealed that Diana had been systematically stealing Brennan Innovations' proprietary technology for over a year. Planning to launch a competing company backed by foreign investors, she had targeted Christopher specifically because his company's security protocols were the most valuable in the industry. The forged emails were just the beginning. Diana had also manipulated financial records to make it appear that Evelyn had been embezzling from her own company. She had planted false stories with gossip bloggers about Evelyn's supposed mental breakdown. She had even hired private investigators to follow Evelyn, hoping to catch her in some compromising position that could be used against her in court. Everything had been calculated to isolate Christopher from his wife, to make him dependent on Diana, and to position herself to take over his company when his guard was down. But Diana had underestimated two things: Patricia, Morgan's thoroughness, and a mother's determination to protect her child. Christopher had been devastated by the revelations. He met with Evelyn every day at her new apartment in Chelsea. A smaller place than their former home, but filled with light and the promise of new beginnings. He brought groceries, assembled the crib he had bought, and held Sophia while Evelyn slept. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply tried to be the father his daughter deserved. 3 months after the divorce hearing that never concluded, Evelyn agreed to see a marriage counselor with Christopher, Dr. James. Peterson was a renowned therapist who specialized in couples recovering from infidelity and betrayal. His office in Greenwich Village was warm and comfortable, designed to put people at ease while they confronted their deepest wounds. The first session was brutal. Evelyn unleashed years of pain and anger. She talked about how Christopher had made her feel worthless, how he had humiliated her in front of lawyers and judges, how he had threatened to take away their daughter. She talked about the loneliness of being pregnant and alone, of lying awake at night wondering if she would have to raise Sophia as a single mother, of the terror she had felt in that courtroom thinking she might lose everything. Christopher listened without defending himself. He accepted responsibility for his actions, for his weakness, for allowing Diana to manipulate him. But he also explained how Diana had exploited his deepest insecurities, his fear that he was not good enough, that his success was temporary, that Evelyn would eventually leave him for someone more worthy. "That does not excuse what I did," Christopher said, his voice raw. "Nothing excuses it. But I need you to understand that I never stopped loving you. I was just too broken and too proud to see what was real and what was a lie." Dr. Peterson guided them through months of difficult conversations. They talked about trust, about rebuilding foundations that had been shattered. They discussed boundaries and expectations. They addressed the fundamental question: could their marriage be saved? And more importantly, should it be? Evelyn struggled with that question every day. Part of her wanted to hold on to her anger, to keep Christopher at a distance, to protect herself from ever being hurt that way again. But another part of her, a part she tried to deny but could not ignore, still loved him. She saw how he had changed, how he showed up every single day for Sophia, how he had restructured his entire company to prevent anyone from ever having that kind of access or power again. 6 months after Sophia's birth, on a warm August evening, Christopher invited Evelyn to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village where they had gone on their first date. Evelyn was hesitant, but she agreed. She left Sophia with her mother, who had flown in from Ohio to help with the baby, and met Christopher at 7 o'clock. He had reserved their old table in the back corner. It's the one with the view of the garden. There were candles and flowers, but not too many. Christopher had learned subtlety in his months of penance. They talked about Sophia, about how she was starting to recognize faces and smile. They talked about work, how Evelyn's business was thriving again, with several high-profile events scheduled for the fall. Then Christopher pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were legal documents. Evelyn's heart sank, thinking this was finally the divorce paperwork. But as she read, she realized it was something else entirely. Christopher had signed over half of Brennan Innovations to her, not as a divorce settlement, but as a partnership. He had also established a trust fund for Sophia, worth $50 million. With Evelyn as the sole trustee until Sophia turned 25. "I am not trying to buy your forgiveness," Christopher said quietly. "This is what I should have done from the beginning. You have always been my equal partner in everything. I forgot that, and I nearly lost everything because of it. Whether you decide to give me another chance or not, I want you to know that I see you, Evelyn. I see your strength, your intelligence, your worth, and I am so sorry it took losing you to remember." Evelyn looked at the documents, then at the man across from her. He looked older now, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleepless nights with a baby. He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss and climbed back out, changed. "I do not know if I can trust you again," Evelyn said honestly. "I do not know if we can ever get back what we had." "I do not expect to get back what we had," Christopher replied. "That is gone, and I destroyed it. But maybe we can build something new, something stronger, because we both know how fragile it is. I am not asking you to forget what happened. I am just asking for the chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve." Evelyn went home that night without giving him an answer. She spent weeks thinking about it, talking to Dr. Peterson, weighing her options. She knew she could raise Sophia alone. She was strong enough, successful enough, independent enough. But she also knew that Sophia deserved a father, and Christopher was genuinely trying to be that father. On Sophia's first birthday, they had a small party at Evelyn's apartment. Just family and close friends, nothing elaborate. Christopher showed up with an enormous stuffed giraffe and a cake he had baked himself, lopsided and covered in too much frosting. Sophia smashed her little fists into the cake and laughed, and Evelyn laughed too. Really laughed for the first time in over a year, after the guests left and Sophia was asleep in her crib. They worked in comfortable silence, and it felt natural in a way it had not felt for a long time. When the kitchen was clean, they stood on the small balcony overlooking the street, watching the city lights. "I have been thinking about your offer," Evelyn said finally. "About trying again." Christopher turned to her, hope and fear warring in his expression. He did not speak, just waited. "I have conditions," Evelyn continued. "We continue therapy. You are completely transparent about your business and your life. No more secrets, no more lies, even little ones. And we take it slow, really slow. I need to learn to trust you again, and that is not going to happen overnight." "I will do whatever it takes," Christopher said. "Anything you need. All the time you need." They did not move back in together right away. That took another 6 months of counseling, of slowly rebuilding intimacy and trust. Christopher courted her all over again, taking her on dates, sending her flowers, writing her letters that expressed everything he could not always say out loud. He showed her, through hundreds of small actions, that he had changed. 2 years after that fateful day in the courthouse, Evelyn and Christopher renewed their vows in a private ceremony in Central Park, with just their families and closest friends present. Sophia, now a toddler with curly dark hair and an adventurous spirit, served as the flower girl, throwing petals everywhere, except down the aisle, and making everyone laugh. Evelyn wore a simple white dress and the pearl necklace from her grandmother. As she stood before Christopher under the oak tree where he had proposed to her years earlier, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of a young bride who believed love could conquer anything, but the tempered hope of a woman who had survived betrayal and loss and had chosen to love again anyway. Their marriage was not perfect. They still argued, still struggled with trust issues sometimes, still had to work at their relationship every single day. But it was real. It's built on honesty and mutual respect rather than romantic illusions. Evelyn's event planning company expanded into a partnership with Christopher's charitable foundation, creating jobs, programs, and entrepreneurship opportunities for women in underserved communities. Christopher stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Brennan Innovations, hiring a new management team and focusing on innovation rather than empire-building. They had a second child 3 years later, a son they named Owen, and then a third. Another daughter named Grace. Their home was chaotic and loud and filled with the kind of love that comes from choosing each, even on the hard days. On the 5th anniversary of Sophia's birth, Evelyn stood in the nursery of their new home in Brooklyn, watching her 3 children sleep. Christopher came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day in the courthouse?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," Evelyn admitted, "but not with anger anymore. I think about how close we came to losing everything and how lucky we are to have found our way back." "I think about it every day," Christopher said. "I think about what a fool I was and how close I came to destroying the best thing in my life. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt my love again." Evelyn turned in his arms and kissed him gently. "I know," she said. I know. Outside, the Brooklyn streets were quiet in the late evening. Inside, their children slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. And Evelyn Harper Brennan, who had once thought her life was ending on courthouse steps, realized that it had actually been beginning. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the doorway to the best ones. And sometimes love, real love, is not about never falling down, but about getting back up together. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.